Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. In Afghanistan, the government says the Taliban have killed 28 policemen in a series of attacks on security checkposts in the southern part of the country. Local officials say the Taliban shot dead a number of security personnel even after they surrendered in the southern province of Uruzgan. The group claimed responsibility for the attacks in several provinces but denied killing unarmed policemen. The latest spike in violence comes as the warring sides are engaged in peace talks in Doha. Indian forces have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youth was killed during a military crackdown in the Tral area of the Pulwama district. Indian occupation troops have killed over 300 Kashmiris since New Delhi revoked the valley's special status in August last year. In the United States, 2 police officers have been shot injured during protests against a grand jury's decision over the killing of Breonna Taylor in Louisville. Earlier, the jury decided 3 officers involved in the killing of the 26-year-old black lady will not be charged for her murder. Taylor was shot multiple times during a police raid at her apartment on the 13th of March. Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says Tokyo and Seoul must cooperate to counter any threat from North Korea. Speaking to reporters after a telephone call with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in, Suga said the 2 countries should repair bilateral ties. Moon said South Korea and Japan say they share the same strategic interests and will continue to work for peace in Northeast Asia. Earlier, Seoul accused the North Korean military of killing and burning a missing South Korean official. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from Afghanistan, where the government says the Taliban have killed 28 policemen in a series of attacks on security checkposts in the southern part of the country. Local officials say the Taliban shot dead a number of security personnel even after they surrendered in the southern province of Uruzgan. The group claimed responsibility for the attacks in several provinces but denied killing unarmed policemen. The latest spike in violence comes as the warring sides are engaged in peace talks in Doha aimed at ending the decades-long war. The agreement is expected to pave the way for the withdrawal of all foreign troops from Afghanistan. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has called for the resolution of standing regional conflicts in line with UN resolutions. Addressing a virtual meeting of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, Qureshi said Islamabad condemns unilateral actions taken to change the demography of disputed areas. He said peace in the region is important for achieving a sustainable economy. He said Pakistan will continue to play an active role for the success of the SAARC forum. Touching upon other issues, the foreign minister said the coronavirus pandemic has affected the global economy. Meanwhile, Indian forces have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian troops martyred the youth during a military crackdown in the Tral area of the Pulwama district. The occupation forces have also arrested a civilian in the same area. Over 300 Kashmiris have been killed by Indian troops since New Delhi revoked the valley's special status in August last year. The occupied valley has been reeling under an inhumane curfew and communications blackout since then. Moving on, Russia claims militants are planning a massive chemical attack in Syria's city of Idlib to accuse the central government. In a statement, the Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria said toxic agents have already been shipped into Idlib. The center said militants are preparing to make staged videos to pin blame on the Syrian government. It said the chemical weapons will be used against the civilian population. Meanwhile, Syria state media said militants have prepared 2 tons of toxic agents and are keeping it in an inhabited locality in the southwest of Idlib. It said that Syria condemns such heinous crimes and calls on countries supporting terrorists to stop those tricks that target civilians. It added Syria will hold the United States, France, Germany, Netherlands and Turkey responsible for the killing of innocent people without any moral deterrent. Meanwhile, France says international partners must ramp up pressure on Lebanese political forces to form a government. In a speech, Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said the political forces have still not managed to agree on forming a government. He said strong and convergent pressures are pivotal to push the Lebanese officials to respect their commitments. Le Drian said there will be no international financial aid without the reforms. Meanwhile, the International Support Group for Lebanon also called on the country's leaders to get united and form a government. Now, Iraqi President Barham Saleh has called on international leaders to unite in the fight against corruption and terrorism. Saleh made the comments in a pre-recorded speech played at the United Nations General Assembly. Saleh said terrorism cannot be completely eradicated if its financing is not dried up. He said among the tasks which the new government must discharge is the holding of early elections next year. Saleh said these elections should be free and transparent within the framework of a new electoral law. The Iraqi president also called on the United Nations to tackle horrific crimes against the Yazidi people.
We must tackle the crimes of genocide and of the massacres of the Yazidi people in Iraq. These acts aimed to exterminate the Yazidi people. For this reason, the international community must stand shoulder to shoulder with Iraq to ensure that such crimes can never be committed again.
Now, Israeli officials have visited Bahrain to discuss areas of cooperation between the two countries. Earlier this month, Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates signed agreements to establish formal ties with Israel. A Bahraini government spokesperson confirmed the visit of Israeli officials without giving further details. This comes after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a conversation with Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa. In a tweet, Netanyahu said the two sides discussed the principles of the Abraham Accords in the telephone call. Now, in the United States, 2 police officers have been shot injured during protests against a grand jury's decision over the killing of Breonna Taylor in Louisville. Earlier, the jury decided 3 officers involved in the killing of the 26-year-old black lady will not be charged for her death.
A state of emergency has been declared in Louisville, and the National Guard have also been deployed to contain the growing number of protesters. Police say both officers who were shot during a clash with demonstrators are stable and have non-life-threatening injuries. On the 13th of March, Breonna Taylor was shot multiple times during a police raid at her apartment. Her death has become a rallying cry for anti-racism protesters who have called for the 3 officers involved to be arrested and charged. But the jury charged only 1 officer with wanton endangerment for firing into a neighbor's apartment in Louisville. The other 2 officers have not been charged.
Moving on, European Union's diplomatic chief Joseph Borrell says Alexander Lukashenko is not the legitimate president of Belarus because he gained power through electoral fraud. In a statement, he said Lukashenko's swearing-in goes against the will of the people and serves only to deepen the political crisis in the country. He said Brussels is reviewing its ties with Minsk. Earlier, police arrested 364 people during an anti-government protest against Lukashenko's inauguration on Wednesday. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Cyprus and Greece's maximalist claims are behind tensions in the eastern Mediterranean. Erdogan made the comments during a video conference with the head of European Union Commission Ursula von der Leyen. He said both Athens and Nicosia are ignoring the rights of Ankara and northern Cyprus. Ankara's communications directorate said the 2 officials also discussed Turkish EU ties and regional developments. Erdogan said Ankara is ready for talks with Athens and expressed hope that Greece will not miss this opportunity for dialogue. Earlier, Erdogan discussed the situation in the disputed waters with NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg. In a tweet, Stoltenberg said the two sides discussed ongoing efforts for military de-escalation to avoid incidents. The United States says it has imposed sanctions on individuals and entities linked to the leader of Russia's Internet Research Agency. In a statement, the Treasury Department said the IRA conducts operations to exacerbate political tensions and divisions in foreign countries. It said the department has imposed sanctions against the network of Kremlin-connected Russian businessman Evgeny Prigozhin. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Prigozhin is a leader of the IRA and has ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Treasury said the blacklisted individuals are working to advance Russia's influence in the Central African Republic. The IRA is a St. Petersburg-based company that U.S. intelligence officials say was central to Moscow to sway the 2016 presidential elections. The United States has announced new sanctions related to Cuba, restricting the imports of cigar and liquor from the Caribbean country. Speaking at a White House event, President Donald Trump said the Treasury Department will prohibit U.S. travelers from staying at the properties owned by the Cuban government. The president said the decision is part of America's continuing fight against communist oppression. Last year, Washington imposed heavy curbs on travel to Cuba, saying the move aimed to pressure Havana over its support for Venezuela. Since taking office in 2017, Trump has sought to unwind a policy of warming ties with Cuba pursued by his predecessor, President Barack Obama. Meanwhile, Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga says Tokyo and Seoul must cooperate to counter any threat from North Korea. Speaking to reporters after a telephone call with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in, Suga said the two countries should repair bilateral ties. Moon said South Korea and Japan share the strategic interests and will continue to work for peace in Northeast Asia. Earlier, Seoul accused the North Korean military of killing and burning a missing South Korean official. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the man had disappeared from a patrol boat near the border and was later found in the North's waters. The ministry condemned the killing and urged Pyongyang to punish those involved in the outrageous act. Also, South Korea says North Korean troops have killed and burned one of its fisheries officials. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the man had disappeared from a patrol boat near the border and was later found in the North's waters. It condemned the killing and urged Pyongyang to punish those involved in the outrageous act. Earlier, state news agency reported that the official disappeared from an inspection boat in waters near the island of Yeonpyeong 3 days ago. Pyongyang has not commented on the incident yet. North Korea has tightened its borders to prevent the coronavirus from entering the country. Now, NASA has warned the United States Congress of China's dominance in space after 2030 if Washington does not boost its presence in the Earth's orbit. NASA Chief Jim Bridenstine said the U.S. International Space Station will be decommissioned by 2030, leaving an open playing field for Beijing. He said it is critical to maintain U.S. space supremacy in the face of a planned Chinese space station likely to be deployed by 2022. In June, China announced that it is partnering with 23 entities from 17 countries to carry out scientific experiments on the station. Now, at least 28 people have died in a gas tank explosion in Nigeria's central Kogi state. Authorities say 9 children were among those killed. Police said the crash happened after the brakes failed, making the driver lose control of the tanker. They said the explosion took place opposite a petrol station along a highway in the state. State governor says the accident led to the loss of lives and many destroyed vehicles, properties and other valuables. Now, the coronavirus outbreak continues to overwhelm India as another 1,129 people have died in the past 24 hours, while over 86,000 people have tested positive. Globally, the virus has claimed over 975,000 lives while infecting more than 31.7 million people. More details in this report.
As some countries in Asia have succeeded to curb the spread of virus, India struggles with thousands of cases on a daily basis. Country's death toll has crossed 91,000 mark with over 5.7 million infections. Mainland China has reported 7 new cases, down from 10 reported a day earlier. Over in Australia's Victoria state, the number of new daily cases was close to a 3-month low. Boeing hopes that restrictions will be eased sooner than expected.
These numbers are coming down. This strategy is working. We are well on track on Sunday to make some further announcements, and I just wanted to make the point that Sunday will not be a day of massive steps. It will not be. The roadmap does not speak to that. It is not a day when we essentially throw the doors open. It will be, however, steady and safe steps, and that sense of gradual, continual progress.
Brazil has world's third highest number of coronavirus cases, leading vaccine makers to seek out South America's largest country to test their candidates. The country's Sao Paulo state authorities say they're likely to start immunizing their population with China's Sinovac vaccine in mid-December. Over in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warns the country is on the brink of a surge if people did not follow public health guidelines.
In our 4 biggest provinces, the second wave isn't just starting. It's already underway. The numbers are clear. Back on March 13th, when we went into lockdown, there were 47 new cases of COVID-19. Yesterday alone, we had well over 1,000. We're on the brink of a fall that could be much worse than the spring.
In Europe, like other countries where the infection rate has soared, France has been gradually tightening limits on gatherings to avoid a second national lockdown. Unveiling a map of coronavirus danger zones, Paris has given the hardest-hit local authorities days to tighten restrictions or risk having a state of health emergency declared there.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 5 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says nearly 800 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the countrywide death toll stands at 6,437. It said the number of active cases across the country is just over 7,000. The ministry said so far 294,000 people have recovered, while 103 patients are on ventilators. Now in Taiwan, conservationists are collecting rare plant species before they are lost to climate change and human encroachment. The environmentalists say they want to ensure Taiwan's biodiversity is protected and can be reintroduced. Details in this report.
Taiwan has a heavy populated, sometimes polluted, western coastal plain. About 70% of the island is covered in a dense mountainous forest, home to deer, wild boar, and a highly threatened population of bears. The government has made environmental protection and shifting to renewable energy a key priority. The plant hunters are scouring subtropical Taiwan from the rugged eastern coast.
I started collecting plants when I was still at school. I didn't used to think it was that important, but since I began working at the conservation center, I have realized that many living things that used to be there are no longer there. So for many living things, if you don't conserve them properly, then perhaps in the future you'll no longer be able to find them.
The group members have to clamber up a steep cliff and face other difficulties in the rainy climate of the country to gather plants.
Not everyone can go to the places I go to. I can stay a long time out in the wild, in the mountains or forests. I go in scattered directions. I am very good at climbing trees. Not everyone can climb trees.
Scientists have signed a petition calling for immediate action to address the climate emergency. They have demanded the same amount of attention and resources to counter climate change as had been pledged for the coronavirus pandemic.
Well, now Thailand has taken first legal action against Facebook and Twitter for ignoring requests to take down content. The Digital Ministry said they have filed complaints with the Cybercrime Police against the social media giants. It said the 2 companies missed a 15-day deadline to comply with the court orders issued a month ago. If the companies fail to respond to the legal action, police could bring a criminal case against them. The ministry said if the companies acknowledge the wrongdoing, the issue can be settled on fines. Now, stocks in the Asia-Pacific markets have fallen following an overnight drop on Wall Street. South Korean stocks dived as tensions on the Korean peninsula reignited. The Kospi in South Korea dropped more than 2%, but shares of South Korean defense firm Victech soared more than 21%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell close to 2%. Mainland Chinese stocks slipped, with the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen component declining over 1.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index shed almost 1%. In Australia, the ASX 200 declined over 1%. Overall, the MSCI Asia ex-Japan Index fell over 1.5%. Now, the European stocks have declined as investors pull back over dimming economic recovery hopes due to the second wave of COVID-19. The pan-European stock 600 has dropped close to 1%, with retail stocks falling over 1.5%. London's FTSE shed over 0.5%, while Italy's FTSE MIB also slipped. Frankfurt's DAX and Paris's CAC 40 lost close to 0.5%. Now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media. That's Indus.News. Take care.